Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Paranormal Planet. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and I appreciate you joining us this evening. Got some interesting things to share with you guys tonight. First off, I have released my latest book, The Enoch Code, decoding the secret tomb of the Watchers, the lost secrets of the Anunnaki, and the next global cataclysm. I wrote this book after years and years and years of research. It contains around 100 quotes from various experts in various fields that sort of come together to show you the pieces of the puzzle, if you will. The ebook and the paper version are now available, so make sure you check those out. Also, don't forget I will be appearing at the Gaia-Sphere Convention, Boulder, Colorado. I'll be speaking for 1 hour at the Boulder Convention Center there. The PIA will also have a big booth on the convention floor. And I'll be doing a 1 hour talk on the antediluvian origins of the ancient mystery schools. That's something which I discuss a lot of in my new book, The Enoch Code. If you're interested in ancient mysteries and sort of the real Da Vinci Code and how that fits into the greater mystery of the Anunnaki and of the Renaissance painters, etc., then the Enoch Code is definitely for you. I also talk about a code of numbers that seems to have been implanted into various oral mythologies around the world at some point in prehistory. And when you put those numbers together, there's some researchers that show that it is in fact a calculator for calculating what might be the next great global cataclysm. So make sure you check out the Enoch Code. This week I've got some interesting things to show you guys. I have come across some very interesting statements from Dr. Gary Nolan, who was one of the chief scientists with the Pentagon's AATIP program, along with Dr. Travis Taylor, of course, and he made these statements to Tucker Carlson. Listen close.
Can we move back just one sentence?
Yeah.
So without putting your professional credibility, reputation on the line, et cetera, you're around people who study this stuff for a living, who are the most knowledgeable people on this topic in the world.
Yes.
What is their general sense of what this might be?
That this is not from Earth.
Right. That it's not from Earth, that this is these are aliens, essentially.
And, until I see a piece of technology that does something I don't understand, or until I see an alien body, I'm going to also remain skeptical.
Of course, as you should.
But it doesn't mean I won't study it. And people say, well, why, if you are so skeptical still, you're studying it? Because it's the most important thing that could have ever
Of course, but that's why we cover it on the show. Not because I have no special knowledge. I know nothing, really. But
why could
by definition, it's the most important. So is the general belief that these objects, whatever this is coming from outside our atmosphere, or that it's coming from beneath the oceans?
Both, I think. I mean, whatever it is, it's clearly been here for a long time. And it doesn't necessarily care so much about us, but in terms of, if it wanted to wipe us out, it could.
Clearly, obviously.
All you got to do is go out to the asteroid belt and push a big rock our way, and that's the end of us. We're the next dinosaur problem. So the next question is, well, if they've been here all along, before we were even civilized, well, whose planet is this really?
And do you think that there is evidence that this is an ongoing thing?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know if you know the astronomer and venture capitalist Jacques Vallée. You probably heard of him.
Of course, yes.
And so he's actually a good friend. He's written books about the matter, showing that if you go back into the historical records, things written by the scientists and philosophers and mayors and kings of the day, it's in the record. This object was seen, it looked like a wheel, or it looked like a shield, and it showed up over our battles, and, et cetera, et cetera. So you can go back and recontext the observations and say, well, if somebody wrote that today, I'd call it a UFO or a UAP, right?
Of course.
So it's been here. I think really, one thing you have to ask is, well, why do they show up? And maybe it's just, and why don't they land? That's a question I often get asked is, well, why would you? I mean, do you try to establish diplomatic relations with the ants in your garden when you move into a new house? Right.
Yeah, pretty interesting statements from Dr. Nolan. As you recall, he was the a scientist that the CIA turned to also study the brain damage that was being done and recorded in people that were having close encounters with UFOs. This brain damage is not unlike the Havana syndrome, something which I have covered in previous episodes, so check those out. Now, his statements are very interesting in light of a few other statements that were made this week by the renowned ufologist Richard Dolan, who has turned his attention to one of my favorite subjects, which is the subject of alien abduction. And, it was notable to me that someone with his sort of clout in the UFO community has begun to really kind of zero in on the alien abduction phenomenon as being central and key to the entire UFO phenomenon. And that is extremely noteworthy given the research done by Dr. David M. Jacobs, Dr. Johnny Mack, Dr. Roger Lear, Bud Hopkins. There is a host of people who have spent decades researching and collecting evidence for the alien abduction phenomenon, and today it is a mountain of evidence, and it's encouraging to me to see someone like Richard Dolan begin to talk about it a lot. And not only that, but recently discussing some of the observations, if you will, of UFOs in general. It's interesting because when you break it down by eyewitness account as to what the UFO exactly was doing at that time that they witnessed it, often it is the case in a very high percentage of the cases, eyewitness cases, the craft is seen hovering very low over neighborhoods, over the roofs of houses, over the tops of buildings. And Dolan, noted that when you look at all of this various activity combined with what the suggested numbers are for the number of alien abductees on the planet, you could make a strong argument that the bulk of the phenomenon itself is based around a singular program of human abduction. If you know my research or anything about alien abduction, you'll know that central to that program appears to be some sort of genetic hybridization program. That's something I've also covered a number of times in various episodes in the past. And I believe it's extremely important for us to focus, to examine this aspect of the phenomenon and to determine what kind of danger does it really pose. It's interesting because, there's an article there I was showing you guys that had to do with the Pentagon report that was, of course, given to the government, the politicians to take a look at. And in that report, it clearly states that there were unaccounted for pregnancies associated with the hitchhiker effect of the UFO phenomenon. And we have discussed the hitchhiker effect a number of times, and this is the paranormal phenomenon that basically follows you around after you have a UFO experience. On the screen is Dr. David M. Jacobs. He has conducted over 40 years of abductee research, and I believe his research to be the most credible and the most profound of anyone's out there. He's written 2 books. One is The Threat, and the other is called Walking Among Us. And both of those books are horrifying in their implications and in the sheer amount of evidence that he provides to back up his theory that what he thinks is happening after examining all of this 40 years of testimony is that these hybrids are in fact being created to be embedded into human society, that appears to be a very clear goal. And here is Dr. Roger Lear. He is famous for removing alien abductee implants. He is no longer with us. Dr. John E. Mack, the Harvard psychologist who wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning book on alien abduction, and it was simply called Abduction. And you may recall that Dr. Mack was killed by a hit and run driver in England. But as Dolan points out, one of the interesting pieces of evidence in the theory that really alien abduction is the central point of the phenomenon itself is a poll that was undertaken by the Roper Institute on behalf of Dr. David M. Jacobs and Bud Hopkins et al. And the poll was designed in order to give an estimation as to the number of people that may have suffered an alien abduction at one point or another. They were able to basically embed questioning into the poll or survey that had questions that were frequently asked of abductees, but weren't obvious questions. And it was interesting because they got a very large number projection out of this. Now, it was only 2% of those who took the poll were thought to have had an alien abduction once they examined the answers. But 2% is a huge number of people, especially when you consider a worldwide population and not just the population of the United States. However, given the United States population alone, it would be millions of people. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind, how big of a program would it take to do that? And could it be a program so big, so absolute, that pretty much any UFO activity you see is based around that singular goal and premise? It's very interesting. The Roper poll would indicate to us on a 2%, basically that 1 out of 50 people have had an abduction experience. That's a shocking number. And a lot of these people have memory bleed through from the experience from suffering such emotional trauma that some of these memories end up bleeding through the aliens' technique of covering over the memories. And that's how we know anything about it. But what is clear from all of the research done by these gentlemen is that genetics are key to what it is they are trying to achieve. And we need to understand why, because that is the only question that is never answered by any abductee testimony. They talk about the techniques, they talk about the timing, they talk, and this by they, I mean the aliens interacting with the abductees, and in their testimony, really the hows, whys, and wheres, or not whys, but the hows and wheres are answered to the abductees when they ask the questions. The one question which is never, ever answered, though it is asked almost every time, is why. Why are they conducting this program? And, you know, I've also posed this question in the past, because when you talk to these abductees, when you read all of the research, the abductees themselves say, you know, the aliens aren't here to improve the world or improve our society or bring us technology or some kind of special medical, you know, life, you know, altering type of medical equipment or anything like that. They claim that they're simply trying to embed in our existing world, just the way it is, without changing anything. Almost like somebody who's trying to assume the identity of someone else. And when you read some of the word-by-word accounts from the abductees themselves, it's not only does their sincerity often come across, obviously, when they're recounting all of that, but just the sheer oddity and consistency of none of them ever coming back saying, oh yeah, they told me why, here's the reason why. No, it has never happened once in any case that was considered a credible alien abduction case by any of these top-notch investigators. So the why is the big mystery. And I equate it to kind of like a jailbreak, right? I mean, if we're on a prison planet, and many of us think we are, what good would it do an alien species to insert itself into the planet and make itself look like one of the inmates? Now, the difference between the hybrids, the alien hybrids, and normal humans, according to David M. Jacobs, is their ability to control human emotion and thought of those around them within a given distance. In other words, they can control human minds around them, but only within a given distance, and nobody really knows how strong that neural link is as far as how far out it goes, but it's something that's been demonstrated time and again, at least spoken of by many abductees. So here are hybrids who, according to Dr. Jacobs' testimony, he believes has taken somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 generations. So there's been 8 separate copies of these hybrids made, slowly refining them each time to a point where they now look exactly like us, but they come with a neurologic superiority in their ability to control us. That's a dangerous thing, obviously. And it's just so very odd. Why would you want to just look like a population, insert yourself into it, have the ability to somewhat control your surroundings or the people around you, but don't use any of that to improve anything at all or destroy it? It's like you just want to be a part of it. It is the weirdest part of the overall alien abduction phenomenon itself. And this brings us back around to the hitchhiker effect, something that I've been discussing a whole lot of lately. And the reason why is because in the report supplied to the Pentagon, one of the hitchhiker effects that was attributed to one of the members of the program who had experienced this was an alien abduction. Now, we are at a complete and total loss as to explain the hitchhiker effect, as to why someone who witnesses a UFO would then days later have profound paranormal activity taking place in their home, and then that spread out to their neighbors and to their friends and to their family members, and them all have paranormal activity. That looks very much like what Dr. Travis Taylor has proposed as quantum entanglement. In other words, you become somehow subatomically connected to the phenomenon in such a way that it's able to maintain that connection and then manifest around you. For what purpose? Obviously, we don't know. But it brings us to a very important question. If an alien abduction was attributed to the hitchhiker effect within the Pentagon's OSAP program, can all alien abduction, the entire phenomenon, be attributed also to this, what we call the hitchhiker effect? Because the other idea behind the hitchhiker effect is that it's a individual consciousness. It's an alien consciousness that's interacting with us through the hitchhiker effect. We've also, or I have proposed also the idea that there's an entity that could, might be living within the quartz crystal deposits of the Earth. This idea that Gaia, the Earth, it has its own spirit, its own consciousness, that it's, that it manifests. Why it would manifest in ways of paranormal activity or try to mimic that activity is something that seems completely illogical, really. And that's kind of where we are examining the hitchhiker effect role and what it plays in the overall alien abduction phenomenon, which, let's face it, is probably the most important aspect. Because until we figure out exactly why they need to do what they're doing, we will never ever understand intent. And intent is key to our survival as a species. So that's something that is coming to light lately. A lot of people, I think, are beginning to realize that the next logical step, once it's acknowledged that UFOs are real, once it's acknowledged that these other biological side effects, like unaccounted for pregnancies, are in fact part of the phenomenon, how much further of a stretch is it really, guys, to say that this hybrid program is in effect? That they are embedding these hybrids into our society all around the world for an unknown goal. That's something that should concern everybody. So, if you'll recall, it was either last episode or the episode before that, I brought up an article for you guys talking about how the Pentagon was forming a new group. This group was, by all intents and purposes, a paranormal intelligence agency. And this new group had a number of goals that were listed in the article, and if you can go back and watch the episode, and I highlight it for you. But one of the stated goals was figuring out how to defeat or mitigate the hitchhiker effect. That's them moving in on the problem without saying, we're trying to figure out how to stop alien abduction. Because if alien abduction is a part of the hitchhiker effect, and they've now formed a group to devise a way of mitigating or defeating the hitchhiker effect, then you can obviously read between the lines, and it's something that is a natural progression. When they tell the public that UFOs are real, the public's first inclination, besides trying to close their eyes and bury their head in the sand, is to then ask, well, are all these abductees telling us the truth then? Are they taking people? What's the government going to say? Well, yes, they are, and we've got no way to help you. Or, yes, and from our studies, we think we know a way of stopping it now. That looks like the direction that they're headed in. And it's very interesting, because with Dr. Taylor recording frequencies at the ranch of apparently what are alien portals, might we be coming across ways of interrupting this phenomenon as a whole so that it can no longer predate on the human species? Because let's face it, we don't need them here. We don't need them clandestinely taking our genetics without stating to us why they would need those genetics. And I often remind people, and I'll leave you with this, when you conceal something, concealment itself always conceals a weakness. Think about that. There's only one reason really that you conceal something, and it's because you can't just have it out in the open and have your way too. That's central to understanding of what concealment is. So although someone might be concealing a weapon, let's say, they're having to conceal the weapon because if they're seen with the weapon, they get taken out. That's the weakness. And here is a phenomenon which, when you look at the alien abduction part of it, has gone to such great lengths to maintain its clandestine program. That's concerning, but it might also point to a weakness that we can take advantage of. That's what I got for you this week, guys. I thought it was interesting to sort of refocus back onto the alien abduction phenomenon, onto what the actual Pentagon scientists and intelligence personnel were focusing on, and where really the cutting edge of paranormal research is right now. Hopefully you got to take a look at the Washita Bigfoot video. That is our prime cryptozoology program now taking place. We are in the process of implementing what I believe to be probably what is going to be the most advanced monitoring program that's ever been devised out there. So, and you know, we're confident. We're confident we're going to get some really profound results if we stick with it. This area is a perfect area for what we're trying to accomplish. And thanks all of you out there who have subscribed to the Para Intel Agency website. It's paraintelagency.com. There is a ton of new material that is coming for you guys on the website. I have been held up a bit simply because of getting this new book out. It's 342 pages on the ebook, 315 on the print, along with getting the paperback version of my book, Bigfoot Unleashed, completed and out there. It's been a serious time crunch. So thank you again for being with me. I will see you guys next week. Until then, check out my new book, The Enoch Code. I think you guys will like it.